Good evening and welcome everyone. This is Phoenix. I hope you are doing well. And here we are. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2013, and we have a special program this evening, as you know. This is the fourth series of our special guest, Dr. Simon Atkins, who is the CEO, founder and CEO of the Advanced Forecasting Corporation. He will be joining us live on the program this evening from his headquarters, his Southern Hemisphere headquarters in Uruguay. And he will be with us here in a moment. He'll be talking to you, taking your questions, but the topic tonight, the primary topic is Fukushima, the incident that occurred in Japan, and with the meltdown of the nuclear facilities caused by the tsunami, earthquake, etc. That will be the topic. Yeah, let's go right over to Dr. Atkins. Dr. Atkins, are you with us?
Good evening. It's a privilege to be here again.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for joining us this evening. How are things down in your hemisphere in Uruguay?
Beautiful. Very vibrant. Although, as I was just telling many today, we just went through the coldest air mass in over 35 years. This Antarctic air mass swept up from the south and delivered snow to southern Brazil today. So that was a very, very rare event, and it's also a confirmation that much of the globe is cooling, and that would be a good topic for another night.
Yeah, it would be. I have some questions for you. I actually sent you one that you addressed. Possibly we can address that on the air, but we're going to get right down to it. And if you're a new listener and you've never joined us when Dr. Simon is on, Dr. Simon, like I had introduced him, is the CEO of Advanced Forecasting Corporation, and his expertise is extreme weather, natural disaster forecasting, planetary hotspots, electromagnetics and climate, natural health, ionosphere to aura, the earth to body shield, energy medicine, moving energy through our bodies through Tai Chi and Qigong, consciousness / new borders of science and spirituality, spiritual science. Now, also, I would like to add to that, Dr. Atkins, with his Advanced Forecasting Corporation, accurately forecast a tsunami event for the North Atlantic area for the eastern coast of the United States that happened. He nailed it. I mean, it wasn't a massive event like what caused the situation we're going to be talking about with Fukushima, but his corporation accurately forecasted that out weeks in advance, and it was pretty amazing. Shocked a lot of people. But anyway, kudos to you, sir, on that. So
I appreciate that, Phoenix. And I just wanted to go over one thing with the audience tonight on basically how we did that, because over time, I'm going to be releasing how we do advanced predictions around the world. And you said the two words, planetary hotspots. And that includes Fukushima, because it was a very large earthquake and tsunami. That is, of course, on the natural side. There's also potentiality on the technology that may have caused that. We'll get into that this evening. But with the tsunami prediction in the North Atlantic, we were monitoring solar magnetics. And what happens is the sun will throw out magnetic energy. It will hit the ionosphere, the top layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and it will ripple down through the atmosphere of the planet, and it will actually catalyze an extreme amount of energy in the form of earthquakes, volcanoes, or tsunamis. In other words, it's kind of like a huge brick coming through the Earth's atmosphere, and imagine throwing a big rock into the middle of a calm pond, and it causes a reaction. It's just that with magnetic energy, we can't see it. But it obviously, like a bomb blowing off, you can't see that either in the energy, but it certainly pushes material out, and it's the same thing that happens when the sun's energy hits the Earth. So that's how we're forecasting these events in advance, and obviously we're following the sun, and we have these proprietary equations that we've made over the last 20 years. Our company is 20 years old, since 1993. and therefore we can determine which areas of the world and at what intensity level we can expect certain planetary hotspots or impacts to occur.
Okay. Very interesting.
So if I may start out,
sure.
I would like to tell the whole audience. Yeah, go ahead, Phoenix.
Well, what I was going to say, since we have so much to cover, sir, you have the floor. The topic, as we know, is Fukushima, and some of our listeners may not be familiar. Now, Phoenix Rising Radio, Dr. Simon, we actually covered this very closely to the fact that some of our listeners had radiation detectors shortly after this event happened, and we were monitoring rainwater and monitoring the areas around us, and we did cover this with a lot. As much as we could with as much information that was available early on. So some of our listeners are very familiar, but some new listeners really aren't, because this did not get the press it should have gotten for reasons you'll go into. But, sir, please, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, well, essentially we decided to do the main topic, and obviously we can take questions on other things, but I'd like to keep it mainly centered on Fukushima, because my background, and I'll get into that in just a second, but the Fukushima event is changing the effects of societal movements around the world. And that has never been said on the radio. Let me say that again. Due to the Fukushima catastrophe, in the next few years, and this is our prediction, that due to the increasing number of statements admitted by officials and governments, there is going to be multiple and large societal movements. What I mean by that is large numbers of people are going to be moved, and large numbers of people are going to move. The truth is coming out. And I am going to be spreading this as much as I can in talking bluntly and without fear. As we've always said, the truth must come out, and people cannot be stonewalled anymore. And I advise anybody that has control in a mainstream or alternative media sense to broadcast all the truth of Fukushima. A very important event happened only yesterday, and this is an example of what is going to happen in the future with increasing frequency.
Okay.
Monday, 22nd of July, 2013, TEPCO, which is the electricity company in charge of the Fukushima nuclear reactor, admitted that since the 2011 reactor breaches, which was 5 of them or 6 of them, the radioactive water is now leaking from the plant, the reactor plant, into the groundwater, making the groundwater radioactive, and this obviously has huge implications for the drinking water in Tokyo, and it also has huge implications for the Pacific as well as the U.S. And I'm going to be getting into many of the impacts already hitting the U.S., including from mainstream, including from peer-reviewed articles, and I have a lot to give in that perspective. But I first wanted to start by telling the audience, if I may, my background. I am not a nuclear scientist, but I have a very interesting background, if I may be so humble to say, in that I combine 2 things. I am an atmospheric scientist. I am educated at the Cornell University Atmospheric Department, and I also have an MBA with business impacts on the environment. And then I went to get 2 doctorates in planetary electromagnetics, and basically my specialty is tracking and monitoring and analyzing and predicting any substance in the atmosphere, whether it be natural or foreign, and I follow those particles around the world, and I forecast the impacts to 3 things: to business, to society, which is us, and the environment. And the second part is, as an atmospheric scientist, I also got a doctorate in energy, medicine, or alternative health. And the radiation that is increasing around the world at this time and will continue to, unfortunately and sadly, increase, is going to be affecting many people. And we must be in the know. We must know how to stop this. We must know how to heal ourselves naturally, because very sadly, the big pharmaceutical military-industrial complex that is growing into the trillions is putting a lot of fear into people when they are told that they have cancer. And of course, we all know that radiation causes cancer due to the long-term cumulative effects of radiation on the cellular respiration. And as this radiation, these hot particles as they're known, collect inside the body, they cause a breakdown or an abortion of normal DNA replication. But not only that, they cause an energetic miscommunication in the body. We are energetic beings. This goes back to acupuncture. This goes back to yoga. It goes back to Qigong. It goes back to Reiki. All Indian and Chinese methods of improving health. And obviously, they are very, very popular now in the U.S. because millions of people are healing through these techniques, including plain old meditation. It affects the electromagnetic shell of our bodies, of our soul. And as I say, we have a huge enemy. And the enemy is not, not only the governments, which are sort of brainwashing the population into thinking that the radiation is not hurting us. They're telling us in mainstream media that the radiation is not hurting us. And even people like Ann Coulter came on to mainstream news and said the equivalent of the radiation in a banana is the same as the radiation coming out of Fukushima.
Oh, it's outrageous.
It's extraordinary brainwashing. And these people are literally programmed by the establishment to come onto the most popular channels and to tell the masses that it's okay, we have nothing to worry about. But the reason why I have summoned up the courage to come onto your show tonight to tell everybody about this, and hopefully the recording gets out to many more, is because I see as a scientist and as a holistic doctor that the radiation is causing a lot of injuries and a lot of illness and a lot of pain, not only in Japan, but also in the United States and other areas of the world, including Canada and Mexico. And the biggest reason why I have stepped forward, Phoenix, is because there are so many lies in mainstream media. The government is literally taking very little to no action, and they are sweeping it underneath the carpet. And I cannot have no voice anymore. I must speak out, and so are many other people.
Yes, Simon, it's, when I told you we first covered the Fukushima situation on my radio program, and the reason I did was because I've always followed the news closely, and for many, many years. And I remember whenever the situation at Chernobyl happened, the news broadcasting was different than it is now. There was less mind control and less people control in the news. They were just a little, I mean, we didn't get all the truth, but they were a little bit more forthcoming. There wasn't so much oppressive control. And I know that the situation that happened with Chernobyl, that radiation went all the way around the Earth, went across, all the way across the Pacific, all the way across the western United States, and actually I put out links that showed studies years later about all the radiation from Chernobyl alone. And I remember watching on television in the Midwestern United States, Dr. Simon, the radiation had been detected in cow's milk and butter, and there were actually some children who got sick from drinking cow's milk from the radiation from Chernobyl, all the way out into the Midwest of the United States. And I'm talking about all the way around the globe. And they dumped tons and tons of milk, many thousands of gallons, into pits because of this. And I remember watching this. Now, whenever we started watching the situation with Fukushima, I saw the film of the one reactor exploding like an atomic bomb, and I did some research, found out they had MOX fuel, which is one of the most deadly type fuels that's actually mixed with plutonium, and I know that they have found radioactive rods and fuel rods a mile from the reactor site on the land, which means, Dr. Simon, one would think if the explosion happened, those MOX and plutonium rods that contain plutonium also landed in the ocean. And, of course, they were never recovered because of all of that. And I know you'll get into this, but what we're looking at here is something many, many times more severe than Chernobyl, and it is nowhere near containment. And this is going to get out of hand. We could possibly get into what's called China syndrome event, which some of my listeners are aware of. We used to talk about this, but please, sir, this is so important and has been so... I mean, they've changed the standards. One thing that gets my goat on this, and then I'll let you have the floor, sir, the fact that they actually in the United States changed the level standards, because we found here on the East Coast in Pennsylvania in rainwater, radioactive iodine, I forget how many times higher than the safe limit right in rainwater here. And, of course, the President of the United States actually came on television and said there's no way that the radiation could reach the United States. We knew right then, I'm like, this isn't true. And I brought forward all the stats, the statistics, and everything to my listeners, and they could actually look at the reports that were put out with the radiation listings from Chernobyl, which was much further away than Fukushima. So, I mean, it was proof right there that the United States government was lying. And one thing, I'm sure you're aware of this, out in Berkeley, University of Berkeley in California, they have air quality filters that they're constantly monitoring. They have actually found particles of plutonium. Plutonium, sir, in those filters right on the California coast.
Yeah, it's not only sad and very unfortunate that most people don't really know the truth about what's happening with Fukushima and the impacts to the U.S., but I find it outrageously disgusting that we as a people are not looking at the government correctly. And what I mean by that is many people, too many people, are trusting the officials to be giving them the right information. Meanwhile, people in Oregon, people in British Columbia, people in the Central Valleys of California are raising families, and for less than a day, 2 months ago, ABC News and MSNBC, we don't know whether they made a mistake, but they let out a very important news event one evening in saying that the radiation has now been affecting the fetuses and young children in their genetics and causing more stillbirths. And this was quickly taken off. It was never repeated, and many people didn't hear about this. But when mainstream admits to this, you know that we have a very serious problem. And like you said, Phoenix, Chernobyl, on many of the mainstream sites around the internet, they say that Chernobyl was the worst sort of radioactive catastrophe in the world. It was not. Fukushima is approximately 80 to 100 times, at this current time in July of 2013, it's 80 to 100 times more expansive and more intense, letting out about 100 times more the radiation of Chernobyl. The problem with Fukushima is that it's not only continuing for 865 days. I mean, let's wrap our minds around that for a second. It has been leaking out radiation in increasing volumes for 865 days. That's 2 years, 4 months, 12 days to be precise, since 3/11/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming in the air. It's all over the Pacific. And what we have to do is we've been charting the progress of this, how it's been affecting stillbirths. In the Canadian government let out some studies saying that it found stillbirths along the British Columbia coastline that are 800% year over year increased since 2011. So this is from 2011 to 2012 summer. They found that the stillbirths had gone up 800%. Now,
wow.
People can say, well, you know, that was due to X or that was due to Z. But we know that there is a high probability. It's not certain, but we know scientifically that there's a high probability that this is due to the iodine-129 and also the radioactive cesium and iodine-131 that has been coming in directly not only from the jet stream from Japan into Canada and the west coast of the U.S., but it's also coming in through the oceanic currents. And let's make a comparison of Chernobyl just for a second here so that people better understand this. Fukushima has pumped out huge amounts of radioactive iodine-129. Right, which has a half-life of 15.7 million years. That means every 15.7 million years, the intensity of that radiation is cut in half. So that radioactive iodine-129 is literally going to be with us forever, for at least however far the human mind can see out. We don't know if the human species will be around in 15.7 million years or whether we would have had to take off to another planet. We just don't know. But Fukushima has also dumped up to 900 trillion becquerels of radioactive strontium-90. Now, strontium-90, which isn't talked about much. Often we hear about the cesium and the iodine. It's a powerful internal emitter which mimics calcium. And it collects in our bones. And when it collects in our bones, it basically will eat away. And you'll see people in less than 10 years just literally breaking their bones.
Wow.
And just like hitting their knee on a piece of wooden furniture. There is going to be a lot of that occurring. And the unfortunate thing about Fukushima is we are likely going to see this leaking. I'm going to say this conservatively because TEPCO and the Japanese government, and as well as that the U.S. government, they do not know how to stop this.
Right.
And it's going to be leaking for years, if not decades. The bottom line, Phoenix, is that the reactors have lost containment.
Right.
Now, let me tell you what that means. I mean, people are saying that there's some leaks. Okay, mainstream media like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are still saying that there are some leaks. Well, leaks would imply that the reactor cores are safely in their containment buildings, and there's like a small hole or two which need to be plugged. But TEPCO and the Japanese government don't even know where the cores of the reactors are, like you were inferring.
Correct.
That's not leaking. That's a total meltdown. I'll stop right there.
Dr. Simon, how many... tell our listeners, when you're talking about reactors, now Chernobyl, of course, was one event, which was catastrophic, but tell our listeners who aren't up to speed, when you're talking about TEPCO and the reactors, exactly how many reactor cores are we talking about, and how close are they to one another?
Well, there was 6 reactor cores, and 3 of them have gone into partial or full meltdown, and 3 others, with a total of all 6 now, are actually leaking radioactive waste into either the seawater or the groundwater. So, you know, when you had mentioned China syndrome,
right, we
actually have already had that. Now, the origin of China syndromes goes back to the early 70s, from the jocular notion that the hot reactor core of a nuclear station would pass through to the other side of the Earth. There's a movie called The China Syndrome, and if the reactor's radioactive liquid sort of goes, you know, all glowing blue or green, and it melts through to the Earth, apparently the opposite of that would be the U.S. And so, you know, most sites will say that the China syndrome is a quote-unquote hypothetical nuclear reactor accident. But it's no longer hypothetical. We have seen the China syndrome happen. And this is what I want the mainstream media to get out to people, because they have a duty, and let me say this again, they have a legal responsibility and duty to tell the people of the United States and Japan, and not to broad brush this with cherries and ice cream, but to tell the truth and to say that we have the China syndrome. And what I'm proposing is that some entrepreneur out there that's listening make an awesome website, and they take in all the ideas from many different countries in all different languages. They take ideas from people all around the world, scientists, doctors. How can we, as a global community and as humanity, energetically communicating together as one, how can we stop Fukushima?
Good question.
And that's really my goal for the next number of months. I don't like to say this is my goal for the next few years, because obviously I want to try to be more proactive in getting a solution here, rather than just sitting back day after day after day. Let me tell you a little story. Let me take a little break here, Phoenix, and tell you a little story. As I say, it was a chilly day here in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, where I am this week. And I decided that after a few cloudy days and rainy days, it actually turned sunny here today. And I went out for a bicycle ride, and yes, it was cold, and sure, you know, as a person out on a cold bicycle, we can obviously have the tendency to complain. But what I decided to do was to keep saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And as I was riding, I actually noticed that my energy was building so positively as I sort of said gratitude and thank you. And this word, when we say gratitude, has obviously an energetic communication to the universe. And what I was thanking the universe was for something that often many of us take for granted, and that is the purity of the air. I live and breathe a non-radioactive air mass. And what is bizarre to say and to think is that I cannot say that for everybody in the world. There are thousands and thousands of people out there, some of them even listening tonight, that may actually be breathing radioactive air. And if we stop and think about that for a second, how tragic. And yet most of those people, the majority of those people, don't even know that they are breathing in hot radioactive particles in their air. And that's what really gets me going every day. I am inspired to try to make a difference in the world by not only increasing the number of people that know about this, but also finding a solution. There are always solutions. But what I don't like is people stepping in the way, like governments and agencies that have too big an ego or too corrupt an organization to get in the way and say, yeah, we don't want you finding the solution. And that's what really drives me, I think, to try to make a difference, as I know a lot of other scientists and doctors and just individuals out there in general are trying to do this day.
Very good. Very good. You want to take some questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions, and then we can get into some of the specifics about what's actually going on and what the American government's doing and what we can do as individuals to protect ourselves.
Okay. Okay. Let me load this up here really quick. Let's go to our first caller. And, yeah, that's the thing. You know, we talk a lot about this, but what are the solutions also? Oh, you know, before we go to the telephones, let me give you a question that we actually received from one of our listeners, one of our foreign members, and I got it over in the...
Beautiful.
Here we go. Question for Dr. Simon Atkins, please. And this is from Mr. Mahalo. He says, Aloha Phoenix, can you please ask Dr. Atkins this on tonight's show for the benefit of myself and Maui Jan, and they both are residents of Hawaii. He says, I don't want to move. He said, and if he says that living in Hawaii isn't safe, does this also mean that everybody on the West Coast should relocate as well? He says, thanks. Oops, mahalo. So that was from Mr. Mahalo.
Well, aloha to this gentleman, and mahalo nui loa to everybody in Hawaii. I used to live there in the mid-90s. Absolutely glorious place to live. As usual, I'm going to be blunt when I give the answer. And let me first take you back to a little bit about my past. I moved over to America in 1980. I came over on the QE2 boat. I became a citizen in Hawaii in 1994. I love the United States. But what happened is after a lot of analysis in looking at Fukushima and in looking at what was happening with the government's decisions societally and economically, I decided that the work that I must carry out in the future must be from outside the United States. I have 2 small children. I was living in Montana, and I knew from scientific analysis that radioactive particles from Fukushima had started to land on the east side of the Rockies, in other words, in the plains. This is backed up by different agencies that have come forth showing that there is already Fukushima radiation in the Iowa cornfields, and we'll get into that more. Mm-hmm. But my blunt answer to that gentleman is, unfortunately, there is accumulating Fukushima radiation, not only in the air in Hawaii, but it is tremendously accumulating rapidly around the seawaters and ocean areas of the Hawaiian Islands. Mm. And often our egos say, well, I can't see it, I can't smell it, I can't taste it, I can't feel it, and I don't want to move because this is my home. A lot of people, I hear that. Mm-hmm. But remember, we do have a choice. I hear a lot of people saying, well, I can't move, I don't have the money. Well, let's be blunt. Maybe if you had a huge, huge sale and you really put down your assets and you put down how it could be really physically possible to move, I think many of us, not all of us, but many of us may see the light and be able to move. I think, moving internationally is just such a huge and overwhelming project that most people say, well, I can't do it. They just say, I can't. And maybe one program in the future, and a great topic, Phoenix, is that we can show people how it is possible to move to a foreign country. Now, obviously, people say, well, Simon, you're all on the same planet. There's nowhere to run to. But that is a fatalistic attitude. If we all gave up and listened to those naysayers, we would be no further along than cavemen. So it's very important to obviously think about your own circumstances. Not everybody's going to be able to leave, but you can certainly make smaller adjustments that don't keep you in denial. So the bottom end to the question is, Hawaii is one of the states that is receiving most of the Fukushima radiation in the U.S.
Wow.
The other areas are the west coast of Canada. Alaska is third, because the jet stream obviously functions right up into the north during the summer months. And then obviously in succession, Oregon, Washington, California, and then so forth further eastward, obviously. So if the Fukushima radiation continues, God forbid, for the next 5 years, but that scenario is increasingly likely, the cumulative radiation in New York City will be the same in 5 years as it is today in Crescent City, California.
Wow. So you're saying in 5 years the way it's accumulated in California. Now, I do know that we have these monitoring stations for radiation all over the United States that people used to be able to access, but all of them on the West Coast have been taken offline. They say it's for funding reasons. They say it's part of the budgetary cut, so they took these radiation detectors. People were saying that's not true. They took them offline because they were registering too high, and they didn't want to alert people to the true situation. And there's another interesting thing. People saw something very curious, Dr. Simon. A few weeks ago, it kind of hit some of the alternative sites that there was a massive amount of homes for sale along the west coast of the United States of people with great deep pockets, movie stars, a lot of people with beautiful homes, and I mean a lot of people started putting their homes up on the market. And people just thought, well, that's curious. Maybe there's a little more to this than we realize.
Well, absolutely. Those in the know, most of them are either going to have a lot of money, which are coming from advisors and people that give them certain information. I mean, let's be frank. The Bill Gates and people of the world that do earn a lot of money, they have the ability to collect a lot of intelligence. I mean, the best wealth management firms around the world have access to tremendous amounts of information and therefore make some of the best decisions in the world according to increasing their asset size. And I did hear about that. I cannot vouch for the integrity of that information specifically, but I would certainly speculate that the people that do have access to a lot of information and do know how to research, which I greatly advise people doing. It's kind of like going to the doctor and saying, well, doc, what's in that vaccination? I want you to tell me what that is. And the doctor says, oh, trust me, it's this and that. Well, my advice is don't trust your average doctor, unless obviously you've known him or her for many, many years, because many of them are in bed with the big pharmaceutical companies. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's unfortunately getting to be all about money. And the Obama administration, going back to Fukushima, ordered the shutdown through the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is one of the most corrupt organizations in the U.S. and world, because they shut down all of the West Coast sensor towers for the radiation starting on April 2011.
Wow.
And they have not been functioning since, except for a few periods of time. And all of that information has not been shared through the Free Information Act, which I find is just outrageous, especially when I seem to remember very clearly words from the current administration that they would be, quote-unquote, more transparent, which has been nothing more than a lie.
Well, you know, an interesting thing, when the situation happened there, and again, for people who really aren't familiar, when we had the massive earthquake in 2011, and it created a tsunami. The tsunami hit the nuclear reactor area where these 6 reactors were at the Fukushima Daiichi plant, and damaged it, physical damage, shut down the power, and that's what caused all this. It was prompted from the earthquake. And I do know that shortly after the event, it was so bad. People have, you know, a lot of people seen the films of the tsunami. There were 20,000 human beings washed out to sea that were not recovered. I mean, they were washed out to sea with this thing. And one of the big the things that the United States government did, they sent a few disaster relief teams over, but they quickly left because of radiation spikes. The U.S. military, they bugged out. The Navy, they left. They were picking up, there was a Navy ship coming over, and far off the coast, they started picking up radiation and had to decontaminate. And I do know that the President of the United States called the government of Japan, and they were very concerned, and their concern was that they had to do everything they could to ensure that TEPCO stock prices didn't dip down too low, because the a lot of American investors invested in TEPCO, and they didn't want the American people to take a financial hit, and that was their primary concern, sir. And when I heard that, I was just like, you had to get me off the ceiling. I'm like, are you serious? You know, we're not sending experts over there to help. We're not sending equipment over there to help. We are concerned that the stock price is going to dip. Seriously, that's our primary concern. And I knew right there we had a serious problem on our hands.
Yeah, this is why it is so outrageously sad and disgusting. It's revolting how we are putting money first before humanity and the safety of our children. And the U.S. government pressured the Japanese government to restart its nuclear program because it did not want the scrutiny of people looking at the U.S. nuclear program, of which many of the nuclear reactors sit on or near tectonic plates, or are not up to code according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC.
The type of reactor, which was made by General Electric, I believe, that type of reactor that basically, it's a very strange design. They're spent fuel rods. They actually keep suspended in a pool of water in the building above the actual reactor. It's like it's a disaster waiting to happen. And we have those very type of reactors, the same design here in the United States. And we just got a question through Skype, Dr. Simon. Someone said, and this was from Nettie, she said, Dr. Simon, is there any place in the United States that is safest? Like, what if you were forced to because of health reasons or whatever, and you had to stay in the continental United States, or that's what you chose to do? Is there any place that you could stay? What would be the best alternative?
Well, and I appreciate this very good question. If people go into any search engine and they type in NADP, and it stands for the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, NADP, they will see a map of the U.S. that was done in conjunction with the USGS, which is the United States Geological Society. And it shows the amount of cesium-137, which is one of the radioactive isotopes from Fukushima. And I'm looking at it right now, and I see green dots essentially over most of the U.S., except along the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
And so having an expertise in atmospheric science, 5 years from now, almost everywhere in the U.S., if the Fukushima disaster continues, again, a probable to increasingly likely scenario, I say that carefully, with carefully chosen words, but in 5 years, if that were to continue, you would essentially get the quote-unquote safest areas for lack of radiation along the Rio Grande in West Texas, and as well as that along the Gulf Coast and Florida. However, the unfortunate aspect along the Gulf Coast is that, thanks to BP, they seriously contaminated the Gulf of Mexico, not from the crude necessarily, although that was bad, but from the core exit, the contaminant that has been banned in over 40 nations. And with BP knowing that they had banned it in the North Sea and in the Atlantic and in the Indian and West Pacific, they used it to clean up the oil in the Gulf of Mexico, knowing that it causes extreme genetic defects in not only animals but humans, as well as terribly serious illnesses, worse than or equivalent to the Gulf War syndrome. And so, one of the things that I wanted to state, and I'll say it right now, is do not, and I repeat, with quite urgency, do not eat anything out of the Pacific Ocean at this time. If you are buying fish from the Seattle fish market, if you are buying tuna from a fish store in San Diego, refuse to buy it. The more people that refuse to buy this, and I'm asking people to buy Geiger counters, food-grade sensitive ones. Unfortunately, of course, the market not only makes them expensive, but they are designed to be very good, and therefore they take a lot of materials to put them together. The average one is probably going to be around $700, which most people cannot afford at this time. But if people can get their hands on it, maybe they can share a neighborhood Geiger counter, and everybody puts in $70, and then you get 10 people testing it. That's one idea that's working in some communities, and which is very doable, and people take turn taking measurements. But I think the more people that take measurements and they say, look, your fish is 40 times or 140 times the normal radioactive limit, which should be 0, but it's not. It's actually accumulated 400 times higher than it was in 2010. So, for example, the government, let's say, put a level of 1. Anything above 1 unit of radiation was harmful in food. Now, would you guess what it was or is? 401.
Oh, yeah. That's what they've done. They've lifted all the standards because they realized the government set standards for radiation safety, environmental, food safety, workplace safety, had been all far exceeded instantly by this disaster, and these levels were going up and up and up. So the answer to the problem wasn't to address it or monitor. The answer was to raise the safe standards.
Absolutely. And I find this a very... People may say, well, the government was very, very clever. I would use a word very deceptive and very corrupt in doing this, because they will continue to raise the safe line many more times as the radiation becomes cumulatively higher. And I would say that over the last 2 weeks worth of news that people can check out at enenews.com or Fukushima-diary.com. All the information is there, that people can check this out and see that these limits are going to be going up tremendously much higher in the near future. And what I'm talking about is by the end of this year, that number from 1 to 400 could be 4,000, only because so much of the groundwater and the Pacific seawater is now being contaminated on a daily basis with no end in sight. And this is why I think, PHEONIX, this is a much more important time to refresh this subject with your audience.
Dr. Simon, we have, and I'm sure you'll get to meet Captain Keith. Captain Keith Plaskett, he's a ship captain and an adventurer. He lives down in Peru. I think he's on a ship right now. He just went up to Florida a few days ago. He's going to sail a ship down through the canal and head back to Peru. But we're in contact quite a bit, and he works as a marine archaeologist and works with the University of Peru also, and as a former military contractor, real fine guy. Anyway, they were having a real serious problem all along the western coast of South America, particularly Peru, where he's at, and there were dolphins washing up. He said there were dolphins, there were fish. He said they were having kills of dolphins that were washing up all over the beaches, and they couldn't give them an explanation, and they never did accurately explain it. They tried to tell him it was because they didn't have enough food. He said that's nonsense. He knows better. And I personally, immediately when I heard it, I'm like, this has got to be something to do with Fukushima. What's your views on that?
Yes, I would very much agree. The problem is that governments are wiping Fukushima under the carpet, hoping that people forget this because they are afraid that people will panic, that people will do a mass exit, and that they will sue the government and local government agencies for the lack of transparency. And look, business has shown time and time again, you'll remember it going back to Tylenol. Remember in the 80s when they found poison in the Tylenol tablets, and remarkably, Tylenol came forward and said, yes, we are sorry, we've nailed this, we see what the problem is. They gave, obviously it never cuts the chase, but it was better than nothing. They gave the families who had suffered a settlement, and they moved on, but they were transparent. And what we need much more of is transparency. People need to know what's going on, because we can. If more people know about what's happening in any kind of disaster, we can solve this. We are smart when we act together. You take the smartest solutions, and that's why I am beckoning somebody to group all of these ideas together and come up with a solution. In fact, PHEONIX, you may have seen this, that the chief of one of the officials in the Nuclear Regulation Committee in Japan called for and said, we don't know what to do. This was just 2 days ago. We don't know what to do, and we would love to hear of solutions. That's how bad this is. But I take my hat off to somebody that's finally getting out of the fog of their ego and saying, we have to do this. And it shows you that over the last 30 days, and I can feel this, not only scientifically when I look at the data, but I can feel it intuitively, that there are going to be big changes in the next 12 months. One of my predictions, PHEONIX, is that once the media, the mainstream media, that there's going to be somebody, it's going to be a governor along the West Coast, or it'll be a famous movie star that will hear this, or it will hear some other radio broadcast and look at the data and get that information, and it will say, and they'll look in the mirror, he or she, one day, and they'll say, I've got to make a difference, and they'll start tweeting it, they'll start coming out with an interview. It'll get into a major magazine. This will happen over the next 12 months, and people will just get shocked, and they will listen. Let's say it's, I'm no big fan of Brad Pitt, but let's say it's Brad Pitt, and he says, yes, we've looked at the data, the government is lying, and the radiation limits are becoming very dangerous for your children. Think about what that will do. People will panic, and I'm not calling for any panic, but I'm asking people to make an informed and educated decision based on the information that's out there. But when it does happen, and it has to happen, the government, even though it's tightening the reins on all of the information, and we're seeing this, as a major problem in America now, there's a lot of big brother situations going on as the government tightens down on the information. But something will escape, just like the NSA with Snowden. Something will escape, and people will find out very soon about how dire the amount of radiation leaking into the Pacific is, and some of it, a certain percentage, let's say 10 to 15% of it, makes it to the U.S. West. They'll come out, and many people will want to move. And guess what will happen? The number of moving companies, let's say like Allied and others, will get they will get swamped. And people will have to wait months, if not a year or more, to get their containers out if they want to leave. This is what's coming.
Wow, amazing.
And so what I'm saying to people now, those people that know how to make a difference, that can make a difference, that can help other people make a difference, especially if you have small children, especially if you have the ability to make a new life and to help others. People say to me, Simon, you are unpatriotic as an American citizen for leaving the U.S. You are a disgrace. I get everything from A through Z. I get lots of positive, and I get lots of negative, less negative than positive. And I get attacked. Okay? But that's why we each need courage, because we need to show people that if I remain in the U.S., and the government says to me, well, don't say this anymore. We don't want you saying this anymore. Well, then what choice do I have? But if I'm outside of the U.S., it's going to be a lot easier. And that's why I'm asking people to look at this and to say, we need to make a difference. The U.S. government needs to come clean. It needs to say, yes, we've got radiation coming in, but this is the solution, and we are going to do it. That's what they need to do.
I know, you see, and you know as well as I do, the reason is economic. Because like I told you, I saw with my very own eyes the reports of back in the days of Chernobyl, when the radiation, and it was traveling around the world, and it had been determined that it was showing up in cow's milk here in the United States. And how that happens is it actually falls, I'm not sure which one, if it's the radioactive iodine, I believe, falls in the rain and gets on the grass. And it is so powerful, the cows graze in the fields, and that grass, as it's digested by the cows, it's actually, the radiation transfers and is produced in their milk. And there were children actually drinking radioactive milk here in the United States. And that's how this can affect, as it gets on leafy green vegetables. Now, there's some things that we can do as individuals to protect ourselves. Whenever this first started, I was telling people, we can't be afraid of this. We have to be smart. There's things that you can eat that can help you. There's dietary things, but there's some common sense stuff too. Don't let your kids play in the rain. If it's raining, don't go out in the rain. I mean, back when I was a kid, it was fun to play in the rain, and I don't mind getting the rain. I call it liquid sunshine. But now this liquid sunshine has a little bit more sunshine in it than we're used to, if you know what I mean. And
absolutely, absolutely. And this is very important, obviously, for the West Coast and also Hawaii, especially, when the jet stream originates from and goes directly to the Hawaiian Islands at certain times of the year or along the west coast in a storm. That is true. As an atmospheric scientist, I can obviously back up that 100%, that the rain is not only sometimes acidic rain, like back in the 80s we talked about acid rain, but now we have radioactive rain. And there's not many people saying that. So that in fact, there's not many that I know, atmospheric scientists talking about radioactive rain in America.
Oh, it's
just not talked about, and I think it should be. I mean, if you ask a group of 25 adults, okay, at a gathering, do you want me to tell you the truth, even though it's hard to hear, or do you want me to give you a once upon a time story that's going to make you feel kind of, ooh, very nice?
True.
90% of those people are going to want to hear the truth, even though it's going to make them very uncomfortable. But I am always one against the nanny state, and we've heard this a lot, especially going to New York with the Mayor Bloomberg about how he treats everybody like a baby in diapers, that people cannot make their own decisions. I am all for the market and for society making their own decisions, but we need to know the truth. And like you said, Phoenix, it's all about money. The government is not telling people the truth because it is worried about something happening. Now, as I just said, the truth is going to come out. It always does. Okay, it's only going to be a matter of time. And when that happens, one of the predictions is the government will temporarily secure the border. What I mean by that is you're going to have special permission to leave the United States of America.
Oh, yeah, because I can see that.
If that doesn't put goosebumps up your spine, I don't know what is. Not only will the container to get all your stuff take months or up to a year, because think about it, the supply of containers and moving companies is going to stay near normal, especially in the economy that we're in. But the demand, if it goes up 10 times, if it goes up 100 times, the wait times are going to be unbelievable. But some people will just leave with a suitcase and that's it. That's going to happen. Just like it did in Germany, history repeats itself. And so obviously those that can logically connect the dots and see the probable to likely future, a light bulb's going to go off in their head when they hear us talking tonight, and they're going to say, all right, we need to have a Saturday family sit down and decide what we're going to do. There's women that I know that are in California. They are in their 20s or 30s, and they would like to start a family. And I've talked to them, and they've said to me, would you, if you're in my shoes, start a family and stay in California? We both have jobs here. We love our lives. And I say to them simply, what do you put first as a priority, the most important priority in your life? And they say, well, obviously, health is wealth. And I said, okay, so what are you going to do about it? Do you have the ability to leave? And they said, well, I guess push comes to shove. Yeah, I guess we could. But when are those people going to get truly serious? What do we have to see happen before those certain people that want to leave or can leave or try to leave do? Do we have to see something grotesque like two heads with genetic deformities on the TV? Well, that's already happening. That's already happening in Japan. You only have to do the research to show it. Somebody's leaking the information. You only have to go to dailymail.com.co.uk to see the incredible genetic deformations in vegetables and fruits and animals. It's unbelievable. And people think, well, is this not happening in humans? You bet it is.
We have a couple more questions, Dr. Simon. I had one.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, let's go to a phone call, and then I have one by text.
Yeah.
Let's go to area
Beautiful.
code 406. Hello, who's this?
Hi, Phoenix. It's Christina in Montana.
Hey, Christina, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Hello, Dr. Atkins. How are you?
Yeah, Christina. Good, good. My old stomping ground, Montana. Whereabouts are you from out there?
I live in Livingston, just 90 miles
Beautiful.
from where you were.
Yes. Wind City of Montana.
Yes, it's very windy here.
Beautiful. What's on your mind?
Well, I, of course, have heard you talk, and I heard you talk on the last time you were a guest about,
Thank you.
Radioactive fallout here in Montana, and I did look at, I think I visited a website, and the website that you talked about that talks about the measurement, the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, and it does show a big green blip right here in Montana.
Yeah, right near Missoula.
Yes, exactly. So, and I heard you talk about deposition along the Rocky Mountain, the eastern part of the Rocky Mountain front, which is, of course, right where I am. So, in terms of, I guess my question is, I guess I'm looking at accumulation, and if we're trying to protect ourselves with chelation and other supplements, and I'm trying to think. I have a child, and we've actually been thinking about. He's entering high school this next year, and we're. And I actually have another question for you about that. But we're thinking about leaving the States to find a program for him for school.
Right.
So I was just thinking about, for his health, how long before we would maybe see some health effects.
Yeah, great question, Christina, and I appreciate this. What we have to look at is it's not necessarily when the radiation is going to take effect, in a negative way in your health. As I was saying before, it's going to be at the point when you have an Edward Snowden in Fukushima topics. In other words, somebody is going to release the information of what Fukushima is doing to the U.S., and there's going to be some panic. And at that time, you probably won't be able to get out. It'll be too late.
Okay.
That is what it's kind of like predicting a tsunami and saying, if you're not at the coast, will I get affected? If you're I got this question all the time. If I'm 100 miles inland, I won't be affected, will I? Well, sure you will. Because what's going to happen is the power will come down, the food logistics will, be very hard, and it will be altered, and your life will be changed. So we have to look at this as a big picture. But going back to just what you mentioned on the health aspect, at least he's old enough, what is he, 13, 15?
He's 15.
15. So at least, the human beings that are affected the most are, of course, pregnant mothers with the fetuses. And then it's small children under the age of 5, because their DNA is replicating most rapidly. The growth is most rapid. But still, your teenager needs a tremendous amount of nutrition. And he is or she is very susceptible towards any hot particles. You get one hot particle in you, it's going to do some damage because it bounces around, and if it's near the organs, it can hurt the organs. And obviously, look, I want to make something very clear. I don't want to put fear and doom and gloom into people. But again, I need to say this bluntly, that we are getting to the point now where in 2011, TEPCO and the Japanese government said that we would have this all cleaned up within a matter of months. And I knew it wouldn't be so. And now we're going on 865 days, and they've just said outright that it will take 40 years to clean up. And even that's a conservative amount. Okay, this is here to stay. And this is why I'm predicting as a futurist that major social population movements will be happening, both in Japan and within the United States over the next decade. And so I think you're thinking along the right lines. For example, we came to Uruguay, and there is a international English-speaking school program. And you can find this in many countries, with private schooling of and above the standards of public schools, most public schools in the U.S.
Yeah, he's in a private school now, but we've been looking, he's concerned about being able to get the kind of program he wants here in the U.S., and us, of course, being able to afford it. But he's into frontier technology. He's a very gifted design engineer already, and so I can't find
fantastic.
I can't find any kind of program
again,
like that.
You may not get sort of a clone program, if you will, if that's the right word to use. You may not get a clone program in Chile or in Germany or in South Africa. But again, I think what a lot of people are afraid of is if they move abroad, then their lives are going to be miserable. They're not going to be able to learn the language and so forth. And they just get sort of wild and all wound up about how many challenges there is. But when we really look at it, the number of challenges happening in the U.S., and not to get off the Fukushima subject, but with the Department of Homeland Security buying 2.3 billion bullets and armored vehicles, and talking about the FEMA Corps and the first graduating class that Obama had of, Army people taking the role of police people in the U.S. A lot of things are happening. So the big picture is, this is why a lot of people are thinking of leaving the U.S. for a better opportunity. And the scales are now balanced in favor of people finding an equivalent or better opportunity abroad. As long as you do your research, and I think there will be people making websites on the, sort of the pluses and minuses of different programs abroad in the future.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I've traveled and lived in so many different countries myself, and I'm a
fantastic, Christina.
Will just move person, and I'm not. My family is here, but I have family all abroad too. So
wow,
but
fantastic.
I'm mostly looking
if I may ask, Christina, maybe you can write a letter. You can make it anonymous and send it to PHEONIX, and he can post it on, basically your observations that you lived in other countries. It's not as challenging or as nightmarish as one would think, and maybe you can personally help others, move in this general direction of thinking of other possibilities, because most Americans, I would say over 90%, just are somewhat deathly afraid of moving out of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're worried about the financial aspects of it too, and and certainly moving abroad. I know when I've gone to work in other countries, the first thing they ask you is, well, how are you going to support yourself? Can I see your work visa, et cetera, et cetera? And they want to know you have a visible means of support. But if you've done your homework, like you say, and can, make sure that when you move abroad, can you teach English as a second language? You can get jobs elsewhere if you have
absolutely, and there's many opportunities. People that have a general education or that can make a sentence of 20 different words, and I'm not talking that you have to be highly intelligent. I'm talking about your average person can move somewhere internationally, get a job. Look, we used to think that the U.S. was an amazing place for opportunities. It no longer is becoming such that place. When we talk about the economics, let's look at reality. There's more people now on some kind of government assistance than people with full-time jobs.
Right.
So the scales are tipping.
Yeah, and I'm not so concerned for myself. Mm-hmm.
Let me interject something right here, and I'll let you continue on, Christina. It's funny. I was sitting there listening to your conversation, to you and Dr. Atkins, thinking there have got to be Native Americans out here laughing to themselves like, are you serious? None of you are from here. Everybody's talking about how scary it is to immigrate. We didn't come from here. If you want to be a real American, if you want to follow your heritage, be an immigrant, because we all are from immigrants. If you don't have Native American blood on this soil, you're not from here. I tell you what, my great-grandparents, they came from Ireland and England, and I know people, Lake House's family, they're German and Irish, and, we all, our families, our grandparents, they searched for something better. They were in search of freedom. They were in search of economic opportunity. They were in search for a better life. And a lot of people say, well, what about my kids? What about my family? What about them? How about going abroad and planting a seed someplace? Planting a seed and starting fresh and anew somewhere to sprout a new tree, a new family tree, put down roots somewhere else, because it's the human, it's adventurous, it's being brave, and if it's done with thought and due diligence, all it is you're following your heritage. And I know it can be a frightening thing, but you don't think that your great-great-grandparents who got on a rickety wooden ship or possibly came over in steerage with a couple steamer trunks, they didn't have some apprehension? Oh, yeah. I sold the tools one time. My father showed me a wooden box. I said, what's that box, Dad? He said, those are the boxes that your great-great-grandparents brought all their belongings in. I said, and where are the other boxes? He said, that's it. He goes, that's the box. It was one wooden box, and that was it. And they came over and to form a new life. And that's just that's humans. That's what we do sometimes.
Yeah.
That's an incredible perspective.
Yeah. Well, my mom is from Germany. I'm a first-generation American, so I know all about it. And I've been, and the thing is, when you've traveled a lot, there just isn't as much apprehension because people are people, and there's a lot of very kind people all over the world. So I have no apprehension about starting over in a new place, and I'm not afraid of staying here either. I'm just mostly looking at opportunities for my son. Sure. Because he wants to have a chance to contribute, and he listens to your show, Phoenix. He really likes you so much, and he wanted me to ask Dr. Atkins about educational opportunities because, well, he just went to California today to visit relatives, but so he knew I would be calling in tonight, so he asked, ask him.
Yeah, there's amazing opportunities educationally all over the world, and unfortunately, as the education in the U.S. is continuing to slip in its quality, and this is backed up by The Economist and other very reputable sources, how less and less money is going into education. The opportunities abroad are absolutely amazing. Here in South America, they have the equivalent, Christina, and look this up, it's called the Interbaccalaureate. And it's the equivalent of when your son or daughter graduates at 18, that they already have the U.S. equivalent of a bachelor's degree.
Oh, my goodness.
So the quality of the education, people think, well, Uruguay, wait, where the heck is that? Is that some place out in the jungle? It's not. It's an amazing treasure. And the quality of life in many countries outside of the U.S. is bar none, in many ways, better. And this is nothing putting down the U.S. It is reality. It is looking at the major shift that has taken place over the last decade. As I say, I lived in the U.S. for 30 years. And as a U.S. citizen, I am saddened by what has happened over the last 12 years, or probably the last 10 years, since really 9/11, where really societal shifts have made a huge change.
Oh, yes, I know. We're aware.
But make your decision carefully, obviously, and, don't just move because of one or two things, but put everything on a big board, write it out. It may be the Fukushima radiation, which, by the way, if you ask very wealthy, especially very wealthy ranchers in Montana, many of them have Geiger counters, and many of them, if you get to know them, or maybe they will be outspoken like I am, they will tell you that they've already started seeing elevated radiation in their wheat fields.
Okay. I know some, and I'll ask them.
Good. Yes.
Yeah. And so getting back to the nuclear, the radiation fallout, so in the southern hemisphere, where you're not seeing it? You won't be
No,
seeing
so that's a
fallout?
great question, too. Let me tell everybody about that since you brought that up. So as an atmospheric scientist, I monitor the flow in the atmosphere. And I have studied this for 26 years since graduating, and you approximately get 3%, only 3% of the particulate matter from the northern hemisphere into the south. But it will only go down to about maybe 15 degrees south, that 3%, beyond 15 degrees south latitude. And Uruguay is at 35. You will get less than 0.1% of the northern atmospheric particulate matter, including radiation, dust, volcanic, sulfuric, any particulate matter in the atmosphere. So you will not be seeing any of the Fukushima radiation. Now, 35, 50 years from now, could we see it technically if the accumulation were to get massively high in, let's say, oceanic amounts? Maybe. But then it would have to be on the South Pacific side, so bordering Peru and Chile. But Uruguay is in the South Atlantic, and it takes hundreds of years for anything to get from the far north, where Japan would be, to the far south. It's just, you're basically, it's all about limitation of risk.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that. So anyway, this is all just very fascinating and great information, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you,
So
Christina.
much.
I know a lot of people think the same as you. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks. And thanks, Phoenix.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay.
And again, just thank you so much.
Very educated woman there, Phoenix, and she, I think, represents a lot of people that are thinking and trying to make decisions. And what I recommend is that people literally write out on a piece of paper a plus and a minus column. All the plus reasons, the positive and beneficial reasons to potentially leave or to make major changes in their health or in their geographic position, and the negative things. If we leave the U.S. or if we don't make major changes in our lives, what could happen?
True.
Yeah. Very good.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you,
still there,
gentlemen.
Christina. We were just talking about you.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you for your very kind words, and thank you so much.
There you go.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Yeah, let's go to another caller, Dr. Simon. I believe this may be area code 970.
Good evening. This is Fred in Alaska.
Yeah, Dr. Simon, this is Fred, and he's up in Alaska, and he loves his fish, and I bet he's going to ask you about his fish in Alaska.
Well, I have a few
Fred.
things I wanted to go. Good evening. It's good to speak with you again.
Thank
we had
you.
talked previously. I don't know if you recall or not.
I recognize your accent.
I recognize yours as well. Lighten things up just a little bit. We say on the, we think that you probably play Simon Says with your children when you want to get something done, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's get back to serious business here. A lot of questions have been answered, but I wanted to bring a couple of things here. We have colder water up here in Alaska, and I'm wondering if that diminishes any of the radiation, or does radiation propagate more in heated waters than it does cold waters? And the second part of that is this. The Kenai River is famous for its fishing. There are the kings, which are cohos, and there are Chinook, which are the reds, and those are the primary fish that come up there. They also have silvers as well that come later in the year. But for the past couple of years, the king run has diminished. But last year and this year, the reds, the sockeye, have increased. Now, they put a net out in front of the mouth of the river, and they leave it in the water for 5 minutes, and they pull it out, and they've been doing this since '78, and typically they get between 150 and 300 fish. Last week, when the fish were in the river at their peak, they were getting 600 and 700 fish, unheard of numbers. Now, question is this, going back to the temperature of the water and the radiation effect of how it affects up here, do you think these fish are sensing the radiation? Because typically they spend 3 to 4 years out in the ocean, then they come back and spawn and propagate and die. Are these fish fleeing the oceans and going back to their safety waters? Is that why we have such record numbers? Just a thought.
Well, you ask an amazing question. I'll answer them both, Fred. We as a society tend to think that animals in general are very stupid. We put them down. Most people don't even think that quite a few animals outside of cats and dogs have any feelings. And yet the scientific study after study shows that many mammals and birds and fish, they all experience emotions. But fish, bats, butterflies, they have amazing receptors, and they're called electroreceptors. They actually can fine-tune and detect electromagnetism, which is how they migrate based upon using the agonic lines, which is lines of equal magnetism around the planet. And what happens is as we use technology like sonar, we actually move those agonic lines, those lines of similar electromagnetic isobars, and we get whales beaching in record numbers. Now, what has happened with fish is that these magnetoreceptors can also detect radiation. They will not only detect the burning of if it's at high amounts, but they'll also detect the electromagnetic radiation. And so in a nutshell, these fish are definitely sensing the radiation in the water. To us, we are sort of dulled down, D-U-L-L-E-D. We're dulled down in that the equivalent would be if we were swimming in a swimming pool and somebody put in red dye. Would we swim towards the red dye, or would we swim away? Well, we wouldn't know if it's blood or if somebody's putting a poisonous chemical. So you bet most people, I hope, would swim away, and the fish are doing the same thing. So that's to answer that question. The other one I want to get to, and we can get into another discussion on this after I answer this, if I may, but because the jet stream is flowing more from Fukushima and eastern Japan up to Alaska at least 7 months of the year due to your long winters, you're going to get much more radiation into Alaska than Hawaii. Now, Hawaii is getting a lot in the spring and autumn, but Alaska's getting much more because the jet stream over the Pacific is much stronger in the winter and the summer. And what will happen is...
Okay.
And also, Fred, if I may continue, you're going to get the ocean currents, which, and look this up, it's called upwelling. You probably know about this. Upwelling is pushing up the colder waters, and that's how you get so much fish in like the Chinooks and the sockeye, because that upwelling is bringing up vibrant, nutrient-rich waters, and that's why obviously all the whales come up there and they migrate up there, because you've got more upwelling during the storms. Same thing for the crabs. You've got that upwelling, which is going to create much more radiation in the upper part of the oceans.
Okay. Now, I appreciate that, and I put what you've said together. Now, another thought I've had about this is you have mentioned excuse me, you mentioned the southern hemisphere being affected with normal levels. Things are safe down there. Now, I've noticed that what the governments have done, they call it redistribution of wealth, when in fact they have cut down the agriculture and food production here in the U.S., and they have shifted it to South America, Chile, Uruguay, Santiago, and all that area down there. And they have also shifted a lot of our food production to China. I believe that maybe a reason is they knew what was coming and they saw what was happening, and maybe even some of this was planned with Agenda 21, and who knows how far the tentacles and the evil thoughts of man have gone. But now we're getting our food from the South where it's safe because they knew they had to have a food source that was good for the population still, and they wanted to, there's also things going on in America where they want to crash the economy here, so we have everything here. You wouldn't believe, it cost us almost $3.50 to $4 per pound to buy apples here. It cost us sometimes upwards of $8 and $9 a pound to get asparagus here. I go into the grocery store, we are spending 4 times as much up here as you are in the lower 48. And I realize all that, and I realize that gets off on a different topic, but my wife and I are looking at where is it going to be safe to live on this planet. We've been looking at Uruguay. We've been looking at outside of Santiago, Chile, in the hills.
We had a great discussion, Fred. Sorry to interrupt you. We had a great discussion last time, Phoenix and I, with the rest of the audience, about Uruguay. I had done a 22-country study, and believe me, I don't take these decisions lightly. But I think in the future we want to put online all the reasons why certain countries would be good for certain situations. The climate down in Uruguay is fantastic. They only have 2 weeks a year. Let me say that again, 2 weeks a year of near freezing temperatures. They have 11 months of agriculture. It sits on the largest water aquifer in the world. And believe me, the elite and the people in the know that this will be a premier agricultural region in the world, and the smartest investors are already investing in Paraguay, Uruguay, southern Brazil. Uruguay has 12 million cattle, 10 million sheep, and that's for a population of just over 3.5 million. So it's an incredible ratio. And you go through the countryside, which is sort of like rolling hills as you go further and further north, and there's tons of cattle. And I will say this, and I've been to 68 countries, and I've tried the food, obviously, in all 68 I have to eat, but the most vibrant food I have ever tasted is here. You put it in your mouth, you put a piece of steak in your mouth, you put a lemon, you put a cherry tomato in your mouth here, and your face lights up, and you say to the guest host or to the restaurant manager, why are these so good? I mean, I said it for weeks on end. I've been down here many, many months, over half a year now, and I still say, wow, this food tastes really good. It's almost like you want to eat, and you don't have that, what you were talking about, that Agenda 21 down here, because it's just not on the radar scope. They don't feel that they have to figure out how to ruin the lives of 3.5 million people. So that's the reason why it's going to be so awesome. The U.S. is a different matter. You got over 310 million people, so the agenda is much bigger, and I do recommend people look up that Agenda 21 because it is a part of it. And in the beginning of this show tonight, I did infer that Fukushima was not only a natural catastrophe, but if you do the connective logic, there is some technology and there is some elite corruption going on too.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. Now, a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. This is some of my information that I think is important to get out to the audience. We talk about radiation. They use radiation to, quote unquote, kill cancer. It also kills your body. But one lemon is 10. We still there? Okay.
Yes.
One lemon is 10,000 times more effective in fighting cancer than chemotherapy. So where I'm going with this is this. If people are going to be inundated with radiation, which many people, the masses, are going to, in order to protect yourself, I would eat a lot of lemons, and in addition to that, and I don't care where you get your doTERRA essential oil, but they are certified pure, therapeutic grade, and 1 drop of doTERRA oil, and don't quote me on this, but I was told it is like the equivalent of 6 to 10 lemons. And I take a few drops every morning in my apple cider vinegar drink and so on and so forth, but you can fight against these things naturally by eating proper foods that are high in antioxidants and that will help wash that radiation or protect you from it. And the other thing I think is so important, I know there's a lot of people that are probably sitting there listening to the show that are freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. There's nothing I can do, and they're probably getting goosebumps and chills, and their stomachs are tied in knots. And I want to tell everybody with love, don't fear. Understand what is happening, and learn how to protect your body and your family. Learn how to eat properly and educate your friends and your neighbors, because if you give in to fear, you are going to get sick, because fear causes stress, and stress causes disease. And you've got enough to deal with. So you need to get strengthened spiritually and get all the education you can on how to protect yourself by eating properly. And if you can afford it, which I think many of us will be able to do in the near future, look about heading south.
Yeah. You know,
excellent.
Dr. Simon,
Go ahead,
I want to share something with you. When Fred talks about eating lemons, and we do this, we have some of them frozen. He actually takes lemons, he freezes a whole lemon in the freezer, and then takes it out with like a grater, like you grate cheese or whatever with, and grates the frozen lemon onto anything you eat. And that way you get, the rind, everything, and then take the portion you haven't grated, put it back in the freezer. That way you can easily, get a dose of it onto anything. And he says it's good on like a garnish on steak or salads or anything. And that's a way you can eat a lemon.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And Fred, thanks so much for sharing that with people, because lemons, most people think, obviously, they're afraid of becoming too acidic. And yes, they are acidic, but what happens is when they enter the body, it actually makes the body more alkaline.
Yes, it is amazing. Lemons are totally amazing. Another thing about the rind of a lemon as well as an orange is that's where most of the vitamin is contained. Am I still connected?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, Fred. I appreciate you sharing all this.
It got very quiet. And anyway, but that's where most of the vitamin C is contained, is in the rind. And one thing we do is we take our orange peels, and by the way, organic. Eat and buy organic. It is cheaper in the long run, and it will keep you healthy and keep you out of the doctor's office and away from all the other poisons that they'll feed you through the pharmaceuticals. But your lemon rinds and your orange rinds, if you take them and dry them and put them in a coffee grinder and make a powder, I take a little scoop of our orange rind every morning with my chaga. I have a little powdered chaga that I use, and I just take that into my body so it will be absorbed into my intestines, and it'll be of greater use to the body. And the more you study this stuff, the better you can take care of yourself, and you won't be afraid of this. Phoenix asked me months ago, what do you think about the Fukushima thing? I'm like, well, I'm kind of powerless over it, so I don't give it much value. I just learned how to take care of myself, and this is what we need to learn how to do.
Yeah, very well said. Listen, I want to enter just a few things here. There was a very famous quote in a movie called Being There. It's an old movie with Peter Sellers. And the end quote is, life is a state of mind. And it's a very important quote, because what they're now finding, in many even MDs in the field of allopathic medicine are finding this out too, that health is a state of mind. How you're thinking is actually creating your own health. And they find that people that even smoke and drink heavily and eat fatty foods, not that I'm advising any of that, but some people like Eskimos and even the French in northern France, they drink a lot of red wine or they smoke a lot of tobacco, and they don't get sick. And the reason why they're finding out that certain people don't is because they don't allow the negative energy or the negative qi, QI, as it's called in China, negative qi, to enter their body. And this is what they also find out about the octogenarians and people that live over 100 and all about longevity, is that this real secret to longevity and to good health is not thinking negatively. So that would be fear, jealousy, anger, and so forth. The other thing I want to add to you gentlemen and to the rest of the audience is when people move internationally and they've relied on a corporate job in the U.S., they think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What are my interests? What I recommend is, first of all, understanding that we can each fulfill our own needs and destiny. If you write down your top 10 interests, I like photography, I like journaling, I like teaching, you can get any job in any country. And you just write down your 10 top interests and put out there on a vision board to the universe, command it so that you can get a job in any of those areas. Each human being is allowed to and capable of fulfilling their own destiny and their goal and having enough money through their interests to be able to provide for not only themselves and their family.
Yes, that's amazing.
This is a part of the big change, as you know, Fred. This is a part of the awakening.
Yeah.
Totally. There's a very wise man. His name is Gordon B. Hinckley. He is deceased. He was actually the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he said this. He says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. If you focus on today and you live in this moment, right now, Dr. Atkins, PHEONIX, and the audience, this is our life. Nothing else matters. This is all we have is this moment. And when we live our life in the moment, it's rich, it's full. When you wake up tomorrow, it's going to be today. And if you take care of today on a regular basis and train your mind and your focus, you're going to find your problems are going to melt away and that everything is going to work out just how it's supposed to.
Very well said, Fred. Hey, sorry to cut you off. Can we go back to Fukushima if that's possible? I appreciate so much what you said, Fred.
Most definitely.
Okay.
Totally.
Fred, thank you very much.
I appreciate
you coming back on, Fred.
You bet. Have a great night.
Okay, good night.
Cheers.
Yeah, we have we have a few minutes left. I'm going to let you finish up, Dr. Simon, so you can be sure to get all your thoughts and everything you want out there to the audience.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well, there's one thing that I also want to bring up to the audience, the esteemed audience members, because this is important. Just today, there was a 5.3 magnitude earthquake along the shores right near Fukushima.
Yes.
And the number of 5+ earthquakes, if you graph them over time since the 70s, they are rapidly rising. We believe that this is due to increasing electromagnetics, not only in the Earth, but also the Sun. It's a complex scientific arena, but basically, as the Sun energy, as the solar energy shifts, and as the electromagnetics, which is how the northern lights are created in the ionosphere, and how lightning, simple lightning over the planet, that's electromagnetics too, so you know what causes it. As that shifts, we are going to see more planetary hotspots sort of blip off on the radar. We're going to have more larger earthquakes. And it seems like at this specific point in geology and time, that eastern Japan and the far Pacific Rim of Fire, which is the earthquake volcano area that is going off, is basically recording more of these quakes. And, again, not to go into doom and gloom, but we just have to look at the scientific data that this is a race against time. We must stop the Fukushima disaster before the next large earthquake or the next tsunami, God forbid, in eastern Japan occurs. There are hundreds of pools of radioactive water now in the Fukushima area because as they've been cooling down the rods, they have all this radioactive water kept in hundreds of different pools. And if there is a major earthquake, I'm talking 7.5 or above,
right,
and the probability of that in the next 5 years is 42%, we've calculated. In the next 5 years, a 7.5 or greater in the Tohoku region, which includes Tokyo. Tokyo, remember, is sitting on a major fault line like San Francisco is with the San Andreas Fault. There's a 42% chance of a 7.5 before 2018.
Wow.
And if TEPCO and the Japanese government are saying that this is not going to be cleared up in the next 5 years, that means that they've calculated that out of all those hundreds of pools and rods, which are several hundred times more than the Chernobyl, if that all cracks up and goes into the Pacific, there's going to be an enormous amount of radiation hitting before 2020. Now, you may think, oh, that's 7 years away. I've got nothing to worry about. But it's cumulative.
Right.
That's why just before I left Montana, in Billings, a couple of years before, there was this huge big building that's been made. It's called Frontier Cancer Center.
Okay.
And its parking lot, and I'm going to say this as a weird adjective, is sickeningly full. Full to the sick amount. It's always full. And as I drove past that Frontier Cancer Institute, you know, with the U.S. flag ironically flying at half-mast, and I'm thinking, oh, I've got to send prayers to all those people because those thick walls, hundreds of people per month are being radiated with chemo. And chemo, as my book will say later on in the summer when it comes out, is not the way to treat cancer. It is a huge lie. Radiation for the body is not the way to go. And Fred was saying it. There are a lot of allopaths out there, and there are a lot of naturopaths that people can go to. Naturopathic medicine is a $40 billion industry, if you can call it that, but it's a $40 billion sphere of healing that people can go and get well without taking big pharmaceutical drugs. So that was one point I wanted to say. What are our choices? Well, Fred and others were saying, do not eat the Pacific-based fish. Protect yourself and your family by first researching yourself, that is, by yourself, to see what is truly happening, and then going to blogs, and then perhaps we can put documents out on the web to advise people more so than we've done tonight. Are there places to run to? First of all, I wouldn't call it running to. I would call it making strategic and informed and positive decisions for you and your family. It is not unpatriotic to leave a country. I left England when I was 10 years old. My father had a great opportunity in New York at Associated Press, and he made an informed decision that was best for our family. And so on. It ripples on down, and hopefully I've made the right decision for my son and my daughter. The other thing I want to teach people, if I may humbly say so, is spread the news. Take at least 3 things tonight, what Phoenix and I and the other people that have called in that have said, and stop kowtowing to corporate interests that are lying to us. We need to tell the truth for the people and of the people, because we all have to live underneath the cosmos. We all have to live under the sky. Remember what I said, Phoenix, in the beginning, and I said I went for a bicycle ride today, and I had gratitude to breathe in non-radioactive air, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, remember, I do this every day. I look at the radioactive air coming across the Pacific, and yes, it can sicken me too much, and I have to take breaks. I'm human. But when I went out in Uruguay today and I breathed in that really rich, vibrant, chilly air, and I said, every human being that's born and lives on this planet deserves the same.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few minutes, I made a prayer, I meditated, and I felt truly saddened that not everybody has that same chance, that same ability to breathe in non-radioactive air. And it's such a shock. It's such a shock to even me hearing myself say this on the radio, that we have to think radioactive or non-radioactive, because in less than 5 years, just like 10 years ago there wasn't organic produce or not much, well, guess what there'll be in 5 years or less? There'll be radioactive milk, and there'll be non-radioactive milk. And guess how much the non-radioactive milk is going to be? It may not say non-radioactive milk, but what it will say is this milk was produced in California, or the non-radioactive milk was produced in Brazil or Uruguay. And there'll be a 10-to-1 ratio. Non-radioactive milk from the southern hemisphere, if this indeed will happen, I'm just giving you a sort of an example, that'll be $30 a gallon. Or you can get your Walmart special radioactive milk. Oh, don't worry, the threshold is only 400 times or 4,000 times what it used to be in 2010. You know, a few hot particles won't make any difference, right? Wrong. But it will be $2.99.
Wow. Well, Dr. Atkins, we're at the end of the show. Man, time flies whenever you are on. I tell you what, it's amazing. I want to encourage everyone who's listening, spread this show around. Grab the URL of this show, send it to your friends, send it to them in email. Get, like Dr. Atkins said, get this information out there. And we're going to continue on with these programs, and we have dozens of people hanging on the phones now, and with just, like I said, it seems like we never have enough time. And Dr. Atkins, I hope that we can continue to make this a regular thing the way you've been doing, because we just really enjoy it, sir.
Thank you so much. And may I just add that write to your newspaper, write to your congressperson, write to your senator, write it and speak it out. And don't have any fear as usual. We always end in saying, never have fear. Tell the truth, because we're all connected energetically.
Oh, you know it. Thank you, sir. So true. So maybe in a couple more weeks you'll do it again, Dr. Atkins. You'll be our guest.
Absolutely. And maybe we can talk about having no fear to move abroad and what it can do for your life and how you can do it. And maybe we can get into that depending on what your requests are.
Well, I think that'd be a great show, because we actually had someone, while you had mentioned that before earlier in this program, said, Phoenix, please do that show. That'd be great. So I think that sounds like a good topic, sir.
Beautiful. Well, let's make it happen. Peace and love to everybody. Make it special tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll be in touch. Thank you, Dr. Atkins. So there you go. Dr. Simon Atkins, CEO of Advanced Forecasting Corporation, sharing with us all the things about Fukushima. Again, share this program, send it around to your friends, let them know, and say no to fear. That's a big thing. Say no to fear. Say yes to hope. Hope for the best in all things, and be proactive. And that's the thing. You have to make proper decisions as a human being, as a responsible human being, to the best of your ability. Sure, we can't do everything, but you know what? You can do the best for you and those whom you love, because you deserve it. You truly do. So that's it. We will be back tomorrow with the program. Hopefully we'll have some big news, some big things to announce. Be sure to watch Going Global East Meets West for all the updates. And if there's anything really special going on, I'll send a tweet out or put it on Facebook. So until tomorrow evening, be brave, be strong, be happy, but above all, find someone you love and tell them that you love them. Good night, and God bless.